I read the 18 words on my phone screen, over and over again in that hotel lobby in Buenos Aires. We are cutting you loose. Your corporate card is canceled. Figure out how to get home yourself, loser. I stood on the polished marble floor, holding the device while the chill of the air conditioning seemed to seep directly into my bones, but my hand remained completely steady. Around me, hotel guests were laughing in fluent Spanish, dragging heavy leather suitcases across the foyer, going about their ordinary evenings. My own life, or at least the professional world I had sacrificed 22 years building, had just collapsed in a single text message. My name is Nolan Ross. I am 51 years old. Back home in Ohio, I have a 10-year-old son named Liam, who still leaves his baseball glove on the kitchen counter and asks me every night on video call when I am coming back to teach him how to throw a proper slider. His mother passed away 4 years ago after a long battle with cancer, leaving just the two of us to navigate this world together. Everything I did, every long flight, every late-night budget negotiation, every missed family dinner, was for Liam. I needed to ensure he had a secure roof over his head, top-tier health insurance, and a college fund that no corporate downsizing could touch. For 7 years, I worked as the Senior International Procurement Coordinator for Titan Materials, a commercial manufacturing firm based in Chicago. My job was not flashy. I was the guy who went into the tanneries of South America, the textile mills of Southeast Asia, and the machine shops of Central Europe. I spoke the languages, drank bitter espresso with factory owners, learned their grandchildren's names, and built relationships grounded in personal trust. That was how you secured rare materials below market rate, while ensuring supply chain reliability that kept 5,000 assembly workers employed back home in our domestic plants. My superior was Lyle Henderson. Lyle was 47, dressed in tailored suits, and possessed an ego so massive it blinded him to operational reality. He had been promoted to vice president of global supply chain 2 years prior through corporate maneuvering. Lyle loved reminding me of my age and place in the corporate food chain. He frequently dropped subtle hints about how the company needed younger talent not burdened by domestic responsibilities. I swallowed his remarks, wrote his quarterly reports, and let him take credit for my initiatives because Liam needed stability. 2 months ago, Titan Materials faced a major operational crisis. Our primary international supplier of heavy industrial-grade leather, an exclusive high-grade material critical for our multi-million-dollar commercial seating line, threatened to terminate our supply contract. Without that material, our flagship product line for the upcoming fiscal year would halt completely, causing contract defaults across 400 retail distributors and triggering massive regulatory penalties under our commercial distribution agreements. Lyle called me into his corner office, tossing a thick folder onto his mahogany desk. "The supplier in Argentina is walking away, Nolan," he said without looking up from his tablet. "They are claiming we violated contract terms. Fix it. Get down to Buenos Aires next week and do not come back until they sign an exclusive 3-year deal." When I pointed out that 3 weeks overseas was a very long stretch, especially with my son starting his middle school term and taking part in his youth baseball league, Lyle simply leaned back, adjusted his gold wristwatch, and replied that there were dozens of younger managers ready to step into my role if I found international travel too demanding for my family situation. Before I boarded the flight, Liam hugged me tightly around the waist at the airport gate. "Do not go, Dad," he whispered into my coat. "You promised we would go camping for my birthday this month." I knelt down, brushing his messy hair back. "I have to go finish this work project, buddy," I told him, holding back the knot in my throat. "My sister Diana will stay with you. I promise I will be home before your birthday cake is cut." I arrived in Buenos Aires on a Tuesday. The next morning, I traveled an hour outside the city center to the leather tannery compound owned by Alvarez Reyes Industrial Leather. The facility was an impressive, sprawling compound run by Mateo Alvarez, a 64-year-old patriarch with silver hair, calloused hands, and a sharp legal mind. His wife, Elena, handled administrative and legal compliance. When I met Mateo in his office, he did not offer pleasantries. He threw a stack of unpaid invoices and aggressive demand letters onto the table. "Your vice president, Mr. Henderson, treats us like bonded servants," Mateo said in deliberate Spanish. He cut our payment windows from 60 days to 15, demanded 10% price reductions without contract amendments, and threatened to report us to trade regulators when we objected. We are done with Titan Materials. I sat with Matteo and Elena for 5 hours that first day. I listened without interrupting. I acknowledged their grievances, reviewed their financial records, and began crafting a fair legal framework. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked 16 hours a day, drafting a comprehensive $15 million supply contract over 3 years that guaranteed fair payment terms, realistic delivery schedules, and strict quality control metrics. I spent late nights reviewing international procurement regulations to ensure both companies had complete legal protection under global trade standards. During those intense 3 weeks in Argentina, I rebuilt the foundation of our commercial partnership step by step. Matteo was an old-school businessman who valued honor and personal accountability above corporate boilerplate. As we refined the contract clauses, he insisted on a very specific legal provision. "Nolan," Matteo said one evening as we reviewed the legal drafts in his workshop, "I will not sign any contract with Titan Materials if that arrogant man Lyle Henderson is allowed to manage this account. I know how corporate managers operate. Once this contract is signed, he will push you aside and begin violating our terms again." I explained to Matteo that I was merely a procurement manager, not an executive officer. "Then we make you the sole designated representative in the text of the agreement," Matteo stated firmly, pointing his pen at the document. "This contract will stipulate under international trade law that all purchase orders, specification approvals, and dispute resolutions must be exclusively authorized and signed by you, Nolan Ross, as designated compliance manager. If Titan Materials removes you from this account or attempts to bypass your written authorization, the entire exclusivity agreement terminates immediately, and full material rights revert to us." At the time, I viewed Matteo's demand as a generous vote of confidence in my work ethic. I did not fully grasp the legal masterstroke he was putting in place. I updated the legal draft, incorporating the designated representative exclusivity clause under international commercial statutes. Back in Chicago, Lyle messaged me constantly at odd hours of the night. "Why is the contract taking so long? Why have you not secured his signature yet? Stop wasting time drinking tea with foreign vendors and get the deal closed." I patiently messaged back, explaining that international contract negotiations required legal verification and mutual trust. Lyle responded with sharp warnings that my annual performance review was coming up, and that my reluctance to force execution showed my lack of executive drive. At one point, Lyle insisted on hosting a video call with Matteo to force the signing. It was an absolute disaster. Lyle interrupted Matteo repeatedly, made patronizing comments about foreign business standards, and tried to bully him into lowering prices by another 5%. After Lyle disconnected, Matteo looked at me with deep concern. "That man does not respect human beings, Nolan," Matteo said quietly. "He regards people as disposable tools. Be careful, my friend. A man who treats his partners with such contempt will treat his loyal employees even worse." Liam's 10th birthday came and went while I was still trapped in negotiations. I scheduled a video call with him that night. He sat at the kitchen table back home with a small slice of chocolate cake and a single candle. My sister Diana held the phone. I sang "Happy Birthday" to my son through a screen 5,000 miles away, holding back tears as he asked why I could not be there to blow out the candle with him. I promised him I would make it up to him the moment I returned. I promised him everything would be better once this major project concluded. By Wednesday evening of the 3rd week, everything was finally aligned. The complete contract package was printed and bound. A $15 million exclusive supply agreement over 3 years that would secure Titan Materials' entire commercial seating division for 36 months. The formal signing ceremony was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 o'clock at Matteo's facility, complete with local press and industry representatives. I went back to my hotel lobby that Wednesday night, feeling a profound sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt that my dedication had paid off. I had saved the company's major division, protected manufacturing jobs back in Ohio, and secured my own standing at the firm. Then, at 8:15 in the evening, My phone vibrated in my palm. It was a text message from Lyle Henderson. "We are cutting you loose. Your corporate card is canceled. Figure out how to get home yourself, loser." My breath caught in my chest. I opened my banking application immediately. My corporate credit card, which covered my hotel stay, local transportation, and return flight home, had been flagged as closed by the issuing bank. I checked my personal wallet. After paying for local work meals out of pocket, I had exactly $65 in cash and a personal debit card with barely $800 to last until the end of the month. Lyle had not just terminated my employment without cause while I was overseas. He had deliberately canceled my corporate travel authorization, stranding me in a foreign country 5,000 miles from my 10-year-old son, violating notice protections under constructive termination doctrines. I found out later through an assistant back in Chicago what Lyle had planned. The moment I uploaded the final negotiated contract draft to our secure internal server on Wednesday afternoon, Lyle downloaded the document, stripped my name from the executive summary, and presented the agreement to the board of directors as his own personal negotiation triumph. Believing the deal was already effectively secured, Lyle decided to eliminate my salary and position immediately to cut department overhead before the end of the quarter, claiming to senior executive management that I was redundant. Standing in that hotel lobby with $65 in my pocket, holding a phone that contained a text message calling me a loser, I felt an initial wave of cold shock. But within minutes, that shock transformed into a crystal clear, razor-sharp calm. I looked down at my leather briefcase. Inside was the original signed hard copy set of the agreement, containing Mateo's specific legal clauses that Lyle had not even bothered to read. I typed a reply to Lyle. 6 simple words. "Thank you for letting me know." Then I walked out of the hotel lobby into the cool Buenos Aires night, carrying my briefcase, and caught the next local bus back to Mateo's workshop. The industrial district was quiet by the time I arrived at Alvarez Reyes Industrial Leather. Lights were still glowing inside the main office building. Mateo and his wife Elena were finalizing the paperwork for the morning signing ceremony. When the heavy wooden door opened and I walked in carrying my travel bag, Mateo looked up from his desk in surprise. "Nolan," Mateo said, putting down his reading glasses. "What has happened? You look as though you have walked through a storm." I placed my briefcase on the table and sat down in the wooden chair opposite him. "My company just terminated me," I said, my voice steady and flat. "My vice president sent a text message 30 minutes ago. He canceled my corporate travel card and told me to find my own way home." Elena gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Mateo sat completely still for several seconds, his jaw tightening until the muscle in his cheek twitched. "After 3 weeks of exhaustive labor?" Mateo asked, his tone dangerously low. "After you fixed his disgraceful mistakes and built a fair bridge between our companies?" "Yes," I replied. "He downloaded the completed contract draft from our server this afternoon. He assumed the deal was finished and that he no longer needed me." Mateo slowly stood up from his chair. He walked over to the wooden workbench, where the printed contract copies lay neatly stacked. He picked up the top copy, flipping directly to Section 12, Paragraph 4, the designated representative exclusivity clause that he had insisted on drafting. He turned to me with a dark, sharp smile. "Your boss is not only a tyrant, Nolan. He is illiterate in international trade law. He did not read the covenants." "What do you mean?" I asked. "This contract stipulates clearly that Alvarez Reyes Industrial Leather grants exclusivity solely under the condition that Nolan Ross remains the authorized compliance manager oversight officer," Mateo explained. Tap his finger against the page. "Without your personal signature and active employment verification attached to this document, this paper is nothing more than expensive scratch paper. Titan Materials has 0 rights to our material." Mateo turned to his wife. "Elena, call Victoria Montgomery at Apex Industrial immediately. Tell her the exclusive supply opportunity we discussed last year is back on the table, and tell her I am bringing the most talented procurement manager in North America with me." I looked at Mateo in astonishment. Apex Industrial was Titan Materials' largest direct corporate competitor in the commercial manufacturing sector. "Mateo," I said, "I cannot simply jump into another corporate contract. I need to get back home to Ohio." I have a 10-year-old son waiting for me, and I currently have $65 in cash. Matteo walked over, placed his strong, calloused hands on my shoulders, and looked me directly in the eyes. Nolan, listen to me, he said with absolute authority. You have spent 22 years allowing arrogant corporate executives to treat your dedication as disposable. You built this supply chain. You earned the trust of every craftsman in this region. Tomorrow morning, you will sit at the table with Apex Industrial not as a desperate job seeker, but as the master architect of a $15 million supply line. Alina returned to the room with a warm smile. Victoria Montgomery is on her way to our private dining facility right now, she announced. And your hotel room upstairs in our guest quarters is prepared. That night, I slept in the guest room above the tannery workshop. For the first time in 7 years, the heavy weight of corporate anxiety lifted from my chest. I realized that my loyalty had been given to a corporate entity that viewed me as a line-item expense, while foreign business partners I had treated with basic human respect were standing up to protect my livelihood. The following morning at 9 o'clock, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the tannery compound. Out stepped Victoria Montgomery, the executive vice president of sourcing for Apex Industrial. Victoria was 48 years old, dressed in a sharp navy blazer with an intense analytical demeanor that commanded immediate respect. We sat in Matteo's conference room over fresh coffee. Matteo did not mince words. He explained how Titan Materials had attempted to exploit his company, how Lyle Henderson had breached professional ethics, and how I had single-handedly built an airtight, high-efficiency procurement framework. Mr. Ross, Victoria said, reviewing the legal supply chain architecture I had designed. Our company has been trying to penetrate the high-grade commercial seating market for 5 years, but we lack the specialized material pipeline. This framework you designed is brilliant. It cuts logistics overhead by 18% while guaranteeing raw material purity. She closed the folder and looked directly at me. I am authorized by our Chief Executive Officer to make you an immediate offer. We want you to join Apex Industrial as Senior Vice President of Global Procurement. We will provide a starting base salary of $240,000, double what Titan was paying you, along with full remote work flexibility so you can raise your son in Ohio, complete executive health coverage, and a signing bonus of $50,000 paid today. I stared at her in disbelief. $50,000 today? Yes, Victoria replied, pulling a formal employment agreement from her leather folio. And our corporate legal team will immediately handle your return travel arrangements in first class, as well as handle any retaliatory legal threats from Titan Materials under federal labor statutes. She handed me the pen. I signed the contract with Apex Industrial on the spot. 10 minutes later, at 9:30 in the morning, Matteo's office phone began ringing off the hook. It was Lyle Henderson, calling from Chicago for the scheduled contract execution. Matteo walked over to his desk, adjusted his collar, and pressed the speakerphone button so Victoria and I could hear every word. Matteo. Finally! Lyle's voice boomed through the speaker, carrying that insufferable, arrogant tone he always used when he thought he was in control. My team has been waiting on the line for 30 minutes. Are the signed contract documents scanned and ready for upload? We have a press release scheduled for 10 o'clock announcing the exclusive partnership. Matteo leaned against his desk, taking a slow sip of his coffee. There will be no contract signing, Mr. Henderson, Matteo said calmly. Alvarez Reyes Industrial Leather will not be executing any business agreements with Titan Materials. A heavy, stunned silence hung over the phone line for several seconds. What nonsense are you stating? Lyle demanded, his voice dropping an octave, turning sharp and defensive. We agreed on all financial terms. Nolan Ross finalized the package on Wednesday. Is this a cheap negotiation tactic for more money? Because if you are trying to hold us over a barrel at the 11th hour. This is not about money, Mr. Henderson, Matteo interrupted firmly. This is about professional integrity and basic human respect. Last night, you terminated Mr. Ross via a cowardly text message. You canceled his corporate travel cards and left him stranded in a foreign jurisdiction after he spent 3 weeks working 16 hours a day to save your company. Lyle let out a harsh, nervous laugh over the speaker. Nolan? Is that why you are stalling? Nolan Ross was a mid-level employee whose position was eliminated due to corporate restructuring. That is an internal administrative matter of Titan Materials. It has absolutely zero bearing on our commercial supply contract. It has everything to do with it, Matteo replied, his tone cold as ice. If you had bothered to read Section 12 of the agreement your legal team received, you would know that our supply exclusivity was explicitly contingent upon Nolan Ross remaining the sole authorized compliance officer. The moment you fired him, your draft contract became completely void under international commercial law. Lyle's breath hitched visibly over the phone line. Panic was beginning to crack through his arrogant posture. Wait a minute, Matteo, let us talk about this. We can reinstate Nolan. We can give him a title change. Where is he? Put him on the phone right now. Nolan Ross is sitting right here in my office, Matteo said smoothly. But he no longer works for Titan Materials. He is now the Senior Vice President of Global Procurement for Apex Industrial. And 10 minutes ago, we executed an exclusive 5-year supply agreement with Apex. Hat! Lyles screamed through the speaker, his composure shattering entirely. You cannot do that. That deal belongs to Titan Materials. Ross stole corporate property. I will sue him. I will sue your company. I will have federal trade regulators shut down your export licenses. You have no legal standing, Mr. Henderson. Victoria Montgomery spoke up cleanly, leaning toward the microphone. This is Victoria Montgomery, Executive Vice President of Apex Industrial. Our legal team has already reviewed the entire transaction history. Your summary termination of Mr. Ross while overseas constitutes a severe breach of fiduciary duty and constructive discharge under federal labor laws, specifically violating statutory notice protections under the Warren Act framework. Furthermore, Alvarez Reyes held no executed contract with Titan. If you attempt to file frivolous lawsuits or harass our executive officers, we will initiate immediate legal proceedings against Titan Materials for tortious interference and corporate negligence. Lyle was breathing heavily through the phone, completely speechless. Have a pleasant day, Mr. Henderson, Matteo said, and pressed the disconnect button. The room erupted into quiet laughter. I sat back in my chair, feeling an incredible sense of liberation. The man who had called me a loser 12 hours ago had just inadvertently handed Titan Materials' largest competitor an exclusive supply line worth tens of millions of dollars while destroying his own executive career. Victoria's assistant immediately booked my return travel. That afternoon, I boarded a first-class flight back to the United States. As I sat in the spacious leather seat, sipping sparkling water while watching the clouds roll past the window, I reflected on how rapidly life could change when you finally stop allowing toxic people to define your worth. When I arrived home in Ohio late Thursday night, I walked into the house quietly. My sister Diana was sitting in the living room reading a book. She looked up, smiled warmly, and pointed toward Liam's bedroom. He refused to go to sleep until you got home, she whispered. I walked into Liam's room. He was sitting up in bed under his baseball blankets, holding his stuffed mascot. When he saw me standing in the doorway, his eyes went wide. "Dad," he shouted, jumping out of bed and throwing his arms around my waist. "You came back." I picked him up, holding him tight against my chest, feeling tears of pure gratitude fill my eyes. "I promised I would be home for your birthday, buddy," I told him. "And I am never going to let any job keep me away from you again." The next morning, I deposited the $50,000 signing bonus into our family trust account. I spent the entire weekend taking Liam camping in the state park, building campfires, fishing by the lake, and teaching him how to throw that slider he had been practicing. For 3 whole days, I did not check a single corporate email or worry about supply chain metrics. While I was in Ohio enjoying quality time with my son, the corporate fallout at Titan Materials unfolded with catastrophic momentum across the commercial manufacturing sector. On Monday morning, Titan Materials was scheduled to announce their new commercial seating product line to retail buyers and corporate investors. However, when senior executive management requested the final executed leather supply contract to finalize production scheduling, Lyle Henderson was forced to confess that there was no contract. The news hit the executive board like a megaton bomb. Without the specialized material from Alvarez Reyes, Titan Materials had to halt production on their primary revenue-generating line. They attempted to source alternative leather from domestic suppliers in Texas and Mexico, but the quality was far inferior and the prices were 40% higher. Within 2 weeks, major retail distributors who had placed advance orders for Titan's commercial seating line began canceling their contracts due to missed delivery deadlines. Over $32 million in projected annual revenue vanished from Titan's balance sheet almost overnight. Titan's chief executive officer ordered an immediate internal audit into the supply chain department. The corporate compliance team uncovered the text messages Lyle had sent me in Argentina, as well as his attempt to steal my contract documentation and misrepresent the negotiation status to the board of directors. The board acted with brutal efficiency. Lyle Henderson was summarily terminated for gross misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty under federal corporate governance standards, and exposing the firm to severe legal liability under international labor laws. Because he was fired for cause involving intentional corporate misconduct, his executive severance package was completely revoked, his corporate insurance benefits ceased immediately, and his stock options were canceled. Furthermore, when Lyle tried to apply for executive positions at other manufacturing firms across the Midwest, his reputation preceded him. The story of how an arrogant vice president stranded his top procurement manager overseas with a text message, only for that manager to sign the multi-million-dollar supply deal with their primary competitor, had spread throughout the entire corporate manufacturing sector. Nobody would hire him. Last I heard from a former colleague, Lyle was working as a mid-level independent sales agent for a small auto parts supplier, earning a fraction of his former salary while working out of a cramped home office. Meanwhile, my new journey at Apex Industrial flourished beyond anything I had ever imagined. As Senior Vice President of Global Procurement, I rebuilt Apex's entire international sourcing network from the ground up. Working remotely from my home office in Ohio, I managed procurement teams across South America, Asia, and Europe. Because Apex treated suppliers with fairness and respect, vendors lined up to work with us. Within 12 months, Apex launched its new commercial seating line, powered by Mateo's premium leather, capturing 60% of Titan Materials' former market share. Apex's stock price surged, and at the end of my first fiscal year, the board of directors awarded me an executive performance bonus of $120,000, along with equity shares in the company. More importantly, my life balance was completely restored. I never missed another one of Liam's baseball games. I attended his parent-teacher conferences, cooked dinner with him every evening, and spent weekends building a workshop in our backyard where we restored old wooden furniture together. A year after that fateful night in Buenos Aires, Apex Industrial hosted a grand opening gala for our new international logistics facility in Chicago. I brought Liam with me as my special guest. He wore his first tailored suit, looking proud and sharp as he walked beside me through that glass-paneled venue. Mateo and Elena Alvarez had flown in from Argentina to attend the event. When Mateo saw Liam, he bent down and gave my son a warm, grandfatherly hug. "Your father is a great man, Liam," Mateo said warmly in English. "He is respected by craftsmen all over the world because he keeps his word and treats people with honor." Liam looked up at me, his face glowing with pride. "I know, Mateo," Liam said. "My dad is the best." Later that evening, Victoria Montgomery joined us at our table, raising her glass for a toast. "To Nolan Ross," she said, smiling. "The man who proved that integrity, respect, and deep professional expertise will always defeat corporate arrogance." We clinked our glasses together under the warm lights of the banquet hall. Looking back on that night in Buenos Aires, I realized that Lyle Henderson thought he was destroying my life when he canceled my corporate card and called me a loser. He thought he was leaving me powerless in the dark. But in reality, his arrogance was the greatest gift he could have ever given me. It forced me to stop settling for corporate breadcrumbs, forced me to recognize my own professional value, and opened the door to a life of true financial freedom and family happiness. Sometimes, the best response to corporate betrayal is not anger or petty revenge. It is simply stepping back, knowing your legal and professional worth, and letting arrogant people destroy themselves under the weight of their own foolish choices. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found inspiration in this journey, please hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of workplace justice and personal triumph. Your support means everything to our community.